Welcome back to the podcast with me, your host, Pete Titus. Firstly, thank you so much for everyone who's taken the time to write regarding my latest piece of news. It has meant the world to me and has inspired me to push on and work hard at my new role. So thank you so much for that. It really has moved me deeply. My guest today needs no introduction. Charles Jardine has been in and around fly fishing for a long time now. He's shaped how many of us look at fly fishing through his books, articles, his artwork, and a whole lot more. I'm a fanboy, so you're going to have to excuse me a little bit on this, but we have a wonderful conversation about his drive, his determination, and the amazing work that he still continues to do for fly fishing. It really is inspiring. It's a fun conversation. We talk about lots of things, completely unfiltered. As always, I think you're going to enjoy this one.
That's a wonderful sequence. Oh.
Charles, welcome back to the podcast, my friend. How are you doing?
Fantastically. And even more so, when you mention Wayne's World, I'm nodding. That sequence in the back of the car. Now, the viewers and the listeners, if there are, there's not any viewers to this, there's just listeners. Well, it's a rite of passage, is Wayne's World. If you haven't seen it or got there, go there. Anyway.
People who have been guests on here, I always do the nod of the head. I've had now Charles Jardine doing it. I've had John Gierak. I've had Tom Rosenbauer. Everyone, Simon Gorsworth, everyone's done it. So it's a rite of passage if you are a podcast guest. But everything is very good here. It's been a busy year for you, of course, and we're going to come on to some of that very, very shortly. But let's look at the fishing side of things. And you've obviously moved house and you're settled and enjoying life in Wales. That's been fun.
It's been wonderful. It's been a voyage. There are always plateaus, or you think there's plateaus, but there's always things and places to scale. And I've reached that point as well. I think that I've got a new playground. It's great. And finding rivers or finding out about rivers that you never fished is a journey in itself. I always shy away from the term journey, but actually it's very appropriate here. So many things to learn, Pete. So many. Just when you think, oh, I think I know about this, you suddenly realise you don't.
And do you think that's the thing that keeps us coming back, that continual learning process?
Absolutely. I mean, I've revisited fishing small still waters. Now, that's going to divide everybody. Oh, just stop fishing. But there are certain waters where fish can get incredibly difficult. And if you drop a fly on them, they get very frightened because 100 other people have dropped flies on those same fish and they wise up very quickly. And I've gone back to the old patterns I used to tie of, say, Dick Walker and all those others back in the day, Terry Griffiths. And, but they lacked, what they lacked is the sparkle and the brightness. And I mean, there was some bright, but they lacked the sort of obviousness of today's patterns. And I'm finding they're working incredibly well. So it's lovely to, enjoy all these little moments. So, yeah, I'm having the time of my life, actually.
And that's fascinating what you say about the flies as well. And given the background, I'm sure you've probably seen Yvonne Chouinard, Craig Matthews' book about just the pheasant tail. What does that mean to you? Does that sort of tie in with your thought process too?
Not really. There's a part of me that goes, yes, we all crave simplicity and it's lovely. But the other part of me says, well, how dull that would be. To be restricted to one or two patterns and one type of material. No. I'm sorry. And I love Craig. Mara Matzo and I go back oodles. And Yvonne Chouinard, I've met on a number of occasions, and he's just the most delightfully sincere man I've ever met, I think. But I'm at odds with that simplicity, that sort of ethos, because I love the idea of dubbing. I love the idea of trying this and trying that. And if we're just stuck with one material, it would run out. If you think about it. So, no, I'm not of that opinion. I love going back and researching old patterns and looking what and how they are tied, because there are techniques to be learned, manipulations and materials to be made. But by and large, I think I like the exploration of new materials and new ways of using materials that they offer. Restricted to one type, no.
Do you think that's because also as a creative person and as an artist, amongst many other things as well, that restriction would be too much for you?
Yeah, in a word, yes. It is way too restrictive. It doesn't open the windows that I want it to open and let me explore and fly. It really doesn't. That's a terrible pun, isn't it?
Here's a question I was going to ask you a little bit later. Do we call it dressing or tying a fly?
I have no idea. No. I said something far ruder than that. I don't know. I mean, dressing is a rather more exotic way for describing something fundamental, and tying is far more fundamental. So I'm going to stick with tying because it's a fundamental act. I think it's a practical act. I know if you've got somebody like Paul Little, who does the most exquisite salmon flies in the world today, probably ever, then I think you could call that dressing, because it's art. It's true art. Would I want to fish with those? Crikey, no. But back to the wonderful pheasant tail, Schonar, Craig Matthews-y, Matt Sosa, the philosophy, that's tying for me.
Yeah. And for yourself, when you're actually sitting tying some flies, do you sit down and say, right, I'm going to tie a dozen flies and they're all going to be identical? Or does your creative process come into that tying, or are you very regimented?
Well, I'll give you a very odd answer to this. My lovely daughter Annabelle, whom you fished with and met, she turned round to Karen. We just got married, and she said, "So, how are you coping with Dad's ADHD then?" So the idea of doing 12 flies all the same is completely and utterly out of the question. No, I'm sort of done by about 3 or 4, Pete. I really am. I can't be doing with it.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. And I know listeners are going to take heart hearing those observations as well. But let's move back to the fishing just a little bit. And with the tying, I guess this ties in literally with hatches and things like that. And have you any observations from this season that you noticed?
Oh, yes. Now, here's the thing. We've got in Newport, I really shouldn't say this, I should say a city in Wales. If you did a seine net, and I do, I still like exploring bugs and looking under rocks, and the child has never left me. If you did that, you'd find stone clingers and shrimp and agile darters, and they're in profusion, Pete. They're in absolute profusion in a river that's going through an industrial heartland, for goodness sake. So how does that happen? How does that manifest itself? Well, it's quite simply, and I'm probably going to get so much vitriol for saying this, it's because it's not going through farmland, I think. There is not the same kind of attack from nitrates or indeed anything else that you would get in some of our lower lying waters like chalk streams. Now, we know we're putting an awful lot of the blame on sewage, but actually it's a combination of things, and I don't. It's not a combination that I'm finding here in Wales. Not so much. The Taff is an insect factory. The Ebu is an insect factory. The Rumney is an insect factory. There's caddis, there's upwings, there's yellow maize. They're in profusion. So that would be my observation. Learning bugs is a really important thing, and tying again. I'm now tying flies to meet the requirements of hatches, which I haven't done for years, actually. Looking at the fresh, how they're sitting on the water, because the other aspect of these wonderful rivers is they're hard fished. And they're fished by very, very good anglers indeed. In fact, some of the best I've ever encountered. And in order to match them, you have to be good yourself. And it's rather like being, I know you share an affinity with this, with something like Henry's Fork, or one of the more, well-known and storied rivers in America. That gets heavy pressure. And in order to catch fish, you have to be better than the rest, because otherwise you will not succeed. And it's the same here. So my dry fly fishing and my fly fishing has been utterly rejuvenated.
That's absolutely wonderful to hear. And for me as well, I'm fascinated to understand that the observations that you're making, does that mean that you're tying different patterns, or are you tying patterns that you're developing that are working for the set of situations in front of you?
Well, both, I think. I'm leaning very much. The people I'm studying are the Spanish, the Portuguese, people like that, French, who are in a similar position of fishing incredibly impacted waters, that are fished fairly regularly, and having to come up with designs that meet the requirements of not only subtlety but fish catchability. So looking at those afresh, a lot of CDC, as you might imagine. But of course, when you've got the rough and tumble streams that I know you fish up in Italy, sometimes that's not appropriate. So you have to meld and match and move things around to suit the requirements. Learning things. Simon Evans, who I'm sure you know from the One Ask, I mean, I had a issue. Well, I didn't have an issue. I mean, I just had a problem where fish were racing around doing odd things in the tail of a pool on the Ask. I had no idea. I thought they were feeding on minnows, to be honest. And I had no idea what on earth these fish were feeding on. And Simon, bless him, he said, well, not feeding on that, you fool. Well, I could have told him I'm an idiot. But they were feeding on yellow-made dun, just subsurface. Now, I'd never encountered that because I'd not really encountered yellow-made dun so much in that kind of volume. But it's stuff like that alters your whole thing. So enter the soft hackle, enter the wet fly, enter the creativity, maybe something with a wing that's just subsurface. And Ollie Edwards nailed it, absolutely, with his emerging yellow-made dun. I should have listened to Ollie.
I remember him writing about that years and years ago, and it's always fascinated me because where I am, we get the yellow maize, but they sort of start they're usually about a week, 10 days before the Danicas come along, and the trout here don't get locked onto them. Now, it may be that there's not enough of them, but you're saying there's a proliferation of them, so it's on the menu, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would say that, what is obvious with a yellow may might not necessarily be an opportunity to be lost, because you're seeing them, but actually the feeding is being conducted subsurface. So what I'd say to you in this situation, Pete, is don't overlook fishing subsurface, if you're allowed, with a soft hackle version.
I've learned something today, so I'm going to give that a go. And that makes you start thinking about some of the patterns with Danicas and lots of other stuff as well, doesn't it? That perhaps we can play with just a little bit. So thank you for that sage advice there as well. But you've got grayling on the menu as well for you? You're looking forward to that? Do you have that nearby?
Yes, not figuratively, you understand. I have eaten grayling. I'm not sure I want to repeat it. Yes, we've got some rather good grayling around us. Actually, but strangely not on the Usk. They've never taken on the Usk. But up on the Upper Wye, lovely Sean and a few others. But I do love grayling, but I do worry that we've created a monster. I've seen photographs recently of people, and I'm sure it's done out of absolute ignorance, but just gripping grayling way too hard in the wrong place. And, and then they'll say, oh, I only did it for a second. It doesn't matter. If you squeezed it in that area, you've damaged the internal structure of a very delicate fish. And, I sometimes wonder if we shouldn't be doing slightly less grayling fishing. I'll do it, and I love it. Obviously, I do. I'm going to start exploring, going back to my roots a little bit, and start trotting for roach and doing other things, I think, as well, as an adjunct, as something that runs parallel. But grayling are definitely there, but in moderation, I think.
I know last year, I think it was, may have been the year before, that you posted something. And, when people like yourself are saying this, people like myself and many other people, their ears will prick up. And like you say, the fish handling, the lifting of the dorsal fin, I'm really not keen on in the slightest. And like you say, if we can help, even if people listening to this podcast have done that, and somebody like yourself is saying that, hopefully that will have an impact. And I think you mentioned that you were only going to photograph fish in your net as well, if I remember right. I may have got that wrong. So there's that aspect of it. Yeah.
I am not going to be holding up a grayling. There's the old fish I want to have a photograph with, but you know what? What does it actually mean? What does it actually mean to, have your visage with a fish? For me, increasingly, and it's a very personal thing, and if you want to do that, that's fine. As long as you're not damaging the species, I don't care. But for me, it's a deeply personal thing, is catching a fish, and increasingly so. It's the whole consummation of that moment, of the place, the atmosphere, the weather, whether the dog's behaved itself or not, and chances are not. And the catching of that fish is that consummation of all those things. And to be honest, that's a moment shared internally, not externally. And, I'm rather vacillating on this, but I'm quite happy not to ever be seen with a fish again, quite frankly. But of course, then you're seen not to be successful, in inverted commas. He's not catching anything. Well, I could have told you that. I don't care.
Well, I think it's fair to say you've transcended that anyway. And again, you touch on some wonderful subjects that, I recently fluked a salmon on the last day of the season. And I just put one picture. I wrote something about it. And I said, look, I didn't film myself playing it. I didn't film the release. I just put a little picture of the head to remind me that I could send to Emma. You'd have laughed because you touched on dogs there. I didn't have a net with me. And I was just saying to Monty, please let me get this one in, bud. Please let me get this one in, because he was excited. He hadn't seen a salmon for quite some time, so he was kind of excited. But I wrote exactly that. That moment was between me and the fish. And that's a really deep connection. And that's probably a way that we express how we feel about fishing in this connection, isn't it? It really is deep with many of us.
I mean, I better sort of extricate myself from the sizable hole I've dug myself by saying there were some pictures taken with a fish, with trout in Iceland, because they were such... they were the most amazingly marked fish I've ever seen in my life. And not to take a photograph of those would have been a travesty. I'm way beyond all that, I think, really.
And a dog coming along for company?
Yeah. When he's allowed and when he's probably not. He's fast. He'll never be a midge, unfortunately. Midge was, I don't know if many people know, but I mean, he was my companion. I mean, he just was my shadow. I remember him, I may have told you this, but he literally got in front of me as a herd of heifers came towards us, and he stared them down. Actually stared them down. He said, "You're not coming past," and they all parted round him. He was very baffled by that, but he thought he'd won. Bless him. Yeah, Kai's not like that. He's a little fireball of a Labrador that's here, there, and everywhere, and he's that wonderful free spirit. He's the most gentle, affable of dogs. He really is. He's a wonderful dog, and and brave-hearted too. And it's what you want with a Labrador, I suppose. And biddable? No.
Absolutely. And there's a beautiful side story to this. And Charles mentions Midge, and I know many people will know it, but he very kindly helped me with an event we put on at the Fox and Hounds a number of years ago. And I was desperate for another dog. And I said to Charles, look, can you let Midge work his magic on my wife, Emma? And I walked into the reception at the Fox and Hounds, and there's Emma laying on the floor with Midge. And I thought, yeah, there's a job done. So his legacy lives on in many, many ways, and it worked fabulously.
Pete, if you need to get another dog, I'll bring Kai, because he will win anybody over. Honestly, he really will. People that don't even like dogs like Kai. It's extraordinary. He's, yeah.
And they got on well. Monty and him got on well in Stockbridge as well, which was lovely to see. But yeah, they're special. And I often take the view, I don't know if you're the same, that sometimes he costs me a couple of fish, but I don't care. Having him there is much worth it, isn't it?
I mean, you're looking away, seeing what the dog's doing, and something's busily eating your nymph or something. It really doesn't matter, does it? In the great scheme of things, does that really matter? No. Yeah. No.
They're wonderful, wonderful company, and I enjoy every second of it.
And also, they're a really good sounding board, because if you don't know what pattern to put, right, Kai, what do you think we should be doing here? Yeah, no, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. And you're having this ridiculous conversation with something that's looking completely baffled at you, but you get the right answer.
Yeah, that's sage advice once more, I have to say. But I wanted to move on a little bit. And in an ideal world, I'd like to live forever. But seeing Joan Wolfe make 99 the other day, I think I'd have loved to have met her. And I just wondered if or had the opportunity to meet her. But have you met her?
St. Joan and I have cast together. We have fished together when she was married to Lee Wolfe, believe it or not. When I worked on the test for Dermot Wilson, Lee and Joan used to be regular visitors to Dermot. And latterly, she was at my induction to the Hall of Fame in the USA. And we had our photographs taken. Karen met her. And she's as sprightly, and she's as bright-eyed, and as sharp as she's ever been. And how you do that at her age, I don't know. But she is the most elegant, the caster with the most poise and effortless ease. There are only two people I really, really admire in fly casting. I mean, there are lots of people actually I admire, but the two people that I put up as being the ultimate goal to aspire to: Bruce Richards, who I think is immaculate. Again, easy, subtle, and only applies energy when it's needed. And Joan, who's the most exquisitely elegant of casters, but incredibly powerful. But she's a joy. She really is a joy. And she's as kind and as generous as she is as good a caster.
And I'd point listeners towards, see if you can find the video of her casting. There's a slow motion video of her casting a huge amount of line, which is absolutely beautiful. And it does betray her background as a dancer, doesn't it? The elegance, as you say, in Paulus.
You mentioned that. I didn't even know that, you see. I mean, I got that always got that vision of her at the Paris event, where she blew all the competitors away at that I think it was a Charles Ritz event or something like that. But was it Paris Match that took the photograph? I think it probably was, and she could turn a head or two, that girl, in her day, and still does, I suspect.
And what was it like taking people like that fishing?
Nerve-wracking and wonderful, because, Pete, I found that the bigger the personality, the more generous they are with their spirit and their way of dealing with things. They're not mealy-mouthed or mean-spirited in any way, shape or form. So you go out there and, you'd be a jangler. And their first job, they could see it. And they knew this was to put you at ease. So, and thereafter, it was just taking somebody fishing who was generally very erudite, generally wonderful conversationalists. And so it was just wonderful, really. It's a great way to grow up. Don't think I've ever grown up, but it's a good way to start.
And it's wonderful that you say that, because I talk about it a lot on here, and we were fishing the tour together. And at the time, I'd been guiding. I was very, very busy and felt under extreme pressure the whole time when I went fishing with people, because of what you do, they expect you to be the best. And if it doesn't all go to plan, that, why are you doing this sort of thing? And there was a fish in the back eddy, and you jokingly said, we tried to catch it, we couldn't catch it. And you jokingly said, we're supposed to be good at this.
Oh, yes.
And that was a pivotal moment in my fly fishing career, that it released the shackles, my shoulders relaxed, and I looked at fishing in a completely different way from that moment onwards. And it made me realise that everybody gets caught in trees, everybody misses a rising fish. It's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's like listening to a band. You expect, if you hear somebody that is your absolute favourite guitarist or whatever, and you expect them to play a perfect note all the time. No, they don't. If you've ever heard a Jimmy Page solo, it's littered. And I remember some reviewer saying, well, it's the things that don't go quite so well that make Led Zeppelin so good. And I think that there is an element of truth in that. And yeah, we're all fallible. That's the thing, Pete. We really are. We just are. We've got to acknowledge that.
And have you ever felt that yourself? Have you ever felt that pressure being the person you are?
I mean, if you go into any competition, and I still like the old competition because because I do, actually. And the pressure is always there when you do it. And that's, I think, primarily why you do it, to put yourself under pressure, to see if you can actually overcome that. And I need that sometimes. I need that adrenaline surge and that push just to make my brain think in a slightly different way. And I enjoy that, actually. Invariably nowadays, it is a young person's sport, and I do incredibly badly at it. But, I'm always minded by Dermot paraphrasing G.K. Chesterton by saying, if a thing's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. So that's precisely why my approach to competition fishing now. But I remember, but there is a God, there is a fly fishing guide's God that hovers around and brought out at times of absolute need. And I had this chap who will remain absolutely nameless, basically because I can't remember his name, his age. But we were fishing on the Itchen, and it was back in the day, I was a young guide and all the rest of it. And I was on that river maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I mean, I knew it. And I knew the hatches, and it's when we did have hatches, and there were, lots of fly. And I got this chap for a week, and he'd won it in some sort of auction that Dermot had put together in New York or something. Anyway, there he was, and I knew that we weren't going to get on from the first syllable. And so there we were, and it was always frosty. And I, got him into fish. He was fishing the test one day and the Itchen the next, so forth and so on. And then one day I had 2 people. I had to look after one lot and look after another lot. And this chap decided he didn't like the stretch of Itchen he was on. He was going to take himself onto an entirely different stretch to go and fish because he wasn't doing particularly well. And of course, it wasn't owned by us. It was not our water. So I had to quietly go in there and say, excuse me, this is not our water. Yeah, but there's fish rising here. And that was it. There's always that moment where you just tip over. It's not quite a red mist, but my God, it's pink. And I went, fish, fish, I'll show you fish. Marched him up And there was this wonderful sort of back eddy. We're back to back eddies, where there's a weed rack. And along this was a great clump of weed, and fish were lined up just sipping right along the side of right along the edge. And they were just there on emergers. I mean, it was, it was candy to a baby. Really, if you got it right, you got it right. I say, give me that. And I swore quite badly. Give me that rod. Dragged his rod. I didn't even look at the fly. Boom. Sent out a cast. I caught a fish. First cut, it just came up, and I saw the nose, the mouth. It just rolled over that fly, and I can see it right now. Lifted the rod, and I said, slammed it into his hand. I said, now that's a fish. That's a rising fish. Thank you. Goodbye.
And how did it go after that?
Badly.
Yeah. It's wonderful, isn't it? Being a guide is a skill in itself, isn't it? I know I use it again a fair bit, that John Girac always said that the ability of a good guide is to yawn with their mouth shut. Yeah. But I used to have a song, if things weren't going to plan, that I'd always hum to that was my safe song to get me out of when that pink mist, we'll call it, was coming down just a little bit. But it is a skill, isn't it? And when you realise, when you're guiding a lot, you realise quickly if you're probably on a completely different wavelength. And I suspect you're very similar, that you press the buttons to find where you can tune into each other, don't you?
Well, my mentor at that time was a lovely chap called Jim Hadrell. And Jim said, there are no bad clients. You just haven't found the right key to unlock the door. And that's always stayed with me. You just find it. You just spend time. And being a guide, you actually all you do is you basically engage your time and understand them a little bit. That's all you do. You spend time to actually understand the person you're with. And what I loathe, it's not an excuse now to go and pick up a fly rod yourself and fish alongside somebody. That's not a guide. That's somebody going out for a day's fishing.
Yeah.
There's a dog barking in there. That's Monty. I can hear him.
He is. That's the post lady's arrived. So he greets her, and sometimes he gets a treat as well. But you're exactly right about that, because, I know somebody who, he used an example of it, and he'd hired a guide, and the guide said, well, I'll come and see you in an hour, and went off fishing. He said, if he hadn't given me a lift, he'd have driven off and left him there. And that's it. It is your entire day. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it really is.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
No.
You invest your time in their time. That's what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. They're paying.
That's what you're there to do.
They're not paying for you to go fishing, are they?
No.
Yeah.
By all means, if you're invited, go. Yeah, absolutely. If they say, look, would you like to show me how you would approach this? So it's a learning thing. But no, it's not an excuse to go fishing and get paid for it. No, absolutely not.
Good. With you 100% on that one. Now, I wanted to move on a little bit, because there's been some amazing news that has broken in
Hasn't there, though?
week. Oh,
I mean, I am talking, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and Labradors everywhere, to the new editor of Trout and Salmon magazine. And I cannot say how happy I am. I cannot say how good this makes me feel, because a magazine that's been our backbone and our part of our history is in fabulous hands. And I know, Pete, that you're going to take it probably into areas it should now go. I think the format's probably where it was and needed to be, but now it needs a new look and a new audience, perhaps. But congratulations. It couldn't come to a better or a nicer person, frankly. I mean that.
Thank you so much.
If you edit that out, I will hunt you down.
That means the world to me, and I will give it my all. And yes, I'm lucky that I've got the support of the owners as well, and we're going to give it a really, really good go. But the news I really wanted to talk about was yours, which is so much more significant. This podcast is about you and about what you have achieved for many, many years now. But tell us about the Fishing for Schools news.
Actually, Pete, I've got bad news for both of the podcasters about the people bothering to listen to this. and are generous enough to actually want to. So for them, or the person that is listening, the news is after nearly 20 years, I've managed with a team, and everyone says, "Oh, you've done so well. You've done it." It's not me. It's a team. It's a team of wonderful people that have allowed us to create a qualification for fishing and related subjects like conservation and all the other things, insects and but codify it into one little mod, or actually 3 modules, so 3 stages that it's going to go through that will touch GCSE, will be points towards BTEC or an A level, and go towards UCAS points. Now that to the uninitiated will mean that if they can go through this course and are marked, and I'm always wary of anything that says you cannot fail. You could fail this quite easily. They're going to be marked assiduously, so it's not, and it's been designed by the Crossfield Institute, have been used to rural activities as well. It's gone towards Ofqual. They're happy with it as being a mainstream qualification. That means it's minded by government, so it's not some sort of token gesture. It's a proper bona fide grown-up qualification we can offer to schools and even people that are being homeschooled, which there's an increasing number, and we're going to meet the criteria, or hope to, of people that don't necessarily learn in the conventional sense. They don't necessarily learn in a way that is put out in a classroom. That's not to say they shouldn't attend classrooms, but here is an opportunity to succeed where they may not have done quite so well within the classroom structure.
And was this a difficult and hard-fought process to get through, or did you feel that there was great support for what you were trying to do?
Oh, massive support. When you've got something like this, I had a wash-up meeting with Crossfields yesterday, and they said, "I can't believe we didn't know you were going to announce this," because we announced it just over a week ago in the House of Commons. And they've had oodles of inquiries, and they weren't ready for them. Well, at the moment, we're not ready to go. It'll be latter part autumn of next year when we'll be able to roll it out. We're going to trial it at some schools just to make sure it does what it needs to do, and we've got everything as right as we possibly can. But of course, then the layer after layer after layer, we've got to now bring coaches and all the other attendant factors who are going to deliver this on board with what we do. So there's a workbook to be created, which we've done. I've got a very good friend of mine who is a extremely good teacher who teaches teachers, and he'll be mentoring as well our coaches and whoever wants to help deliver this. So, yeah, it's doing everything it needs to do, but it's everything so far. Touch wood. I've got a lot of wood around me here. Everything so far has just dropped into place in a nice sort of even symmetry, which means it's generally okay.
And how have the schools been with this when you've approached them and said, "Look, we're going to be rolling this out"? Have they been supportive too?
They have. It's what a lot of schools have wanted. Don't forget, we're not talking just schools. We're talking about special SEN areas, special educational needs areas. We're talking about pupil referral units, PRUs. We're talking about anywhere where we feel that we've got something to offer young people as a way to achieve. And that is that right there is the central core, is to achieve, is to give them something that is tangible, something that's got really good gravitas, but enable them to achieve and flourish. That's all I've ever set out to do, quite frankly.
And what was that moment like, releasing this sort of news? Because I'm guessing this has been several years of work to come out.
Yes.
And is there a sense of pride of it coming to fruition?
No, I think what it is, it's a thing of, well, this is the first shot. There's going to be an awful long way after this, and the work starts now. Once that genie is out of the bottle, as I described it to someone, and actually there's several genies that suddenly have popped out rather than one or two, one. you suddenly realise what needs to be in place. And I'd had this rosy and misty-eyed ambition to retire at the end of this year. Well, to that. I've got a good year working on all the minutiae of all the areas that I've got to do with the team to make this as good as we can possibly make it, and to get it out there really in a really strong way.
And have you been fazed by what is to come or not?
Yeah, I've had sleepless nights. I mean, I won't even dress that up. I mean, Karen will tell you. I mean, I've been waking up at 3 o'clock thinking, oh gosh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And an undertaking like this is something quite enormous, because you when you deliver something of this magnitude, you suddenly realize that there's an awful lot resting on your shoulders. And my whole life has been dedicated not to letting people down. And I really don't want that to happen. So you double the effort, but then, the night fears creep in and the worm turns in the stomach, and you start getting up and reading at stupid hours and making cups of tea and wandering around and thinking, and then you suddenly go back to sleep and you think, well, I don't know what I was worrying about really.
I know exactly what you mean. And in a small way, I've been going through the same myself the last few days. But the reason I asked whether you were fazed by it, because it's been similar for myself in thinking that. And the waking up has been a good thing, and it's excitement and the challenge that lays ahead. And that's why I asked, because I suspect, despite some of those things, it's the excitement of what is to unfold that keeps you attracted to it, isn't it?
Well, it absolutely is. And it'll be the same for you, that full well that you can draw on the strengths of the people around you. And the same way I can, that if I'm in a hole, I don't need to carry on digging. I can actually stop and draw on that support. So, it's always, I always amused by, people saying, oh, well, haven't you done well? Haven't you? Well, no, I haven't done well. Actually, the team's done well around me, because they're the sum of the parts. And so I'm well aware of that. So I can draw on the strengths of those. And, there is a long way to go. I won't even, dress that up in any way, shape or form. There is. But it's achievable. It's out there now. And it will be give it my best shot. And the trouble is, though, and I hope it doesn't happen to you, but I suspect it probably will, that you take on something like this and then suddenly you have to ease fishing in whenever you possibly can. So it's moment snatch. But actually, Pete, that's a good thing, because they matter even more. Those moments snatched from the mania around you are so important, they're so vital.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I said to them when I had the conversations that we'd been having when they first approached me, I said, look, you need to understand fishing is incredibly important to me. But I think I'm in the process of streamlining, putting the magazine together, which might free me up a little bit more as well. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we can do that. But you said about drawing strength from people, and it is... You've seen when you announced that, and my little piece of news as well, that the support, and I want to use that word community, it's an extraordinary place, our fly fishing community, isn't it?
Mm. Mm. Well, you see it when you come down to Orvis and you do those things. There's this coterie of people that are absolutely exquisite, and all life is there. That's the thing. All life is there. And, you've got fragile ones, you've got robust ones, you've got people that are, all character is there. And, I celebrate the fact that I'm part of that. But I'm part of it. I'm not any way, shape or form anywhere different than they are. We're all formed of the same tapestry, Pete. When we... As intricate as that tapestry is, we've all got a little bit in it.
Some of us have larger pieces, and I'm trying to look behind me because my books, and I have a number of your books there in the background. I think the Sotheby's one I can see, which I still drool over from time to time. But there is, people like yourself, and I've stood up in front of crowds and said the things that you have done and have others have made people like myself and many others. It's formed us as anglers as well. So you may say a small part of tapestry, but it's really not as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I don't know. I mean, fishing's odd. That it's very kind of you to say this, but it's unintentional because you go out and whatever you do is singular. The fact is that you come back and you might write about it, or you might paint it, or you might do something. Again, it's the act of selfishness. And you're doing it because there's a part of you that wants to do that. There's a part of you, and I won't deny there's a little bit of ego of wanting to get it out there and be admired or be celebrated or even sometimes vilified, actually, because that can be exhilarating because you have to defend your corner. And I quite like that, actually. I'm up for a little bit of a scrap every now and again. But our sport is still deeply personal. And if you can convey that, then that's great. You bring along people on that sort of ride. But I'm only too aware that there are several things I've become increasingly aware of. My age. So fishing on days matter now because there's far less of them than there used to be. That I have to get more politically motivated and support, I'm sorry, I'm going to be really blatant, organisations like Wildfish, because if I don't, then my grandchildren are not going to have very much to inherit. So I've got more motivated in that area. But beyond that, you just want to you want to be around the people that you admire and you love the most, and that is the fly fishing community, and it doesn't matter, and it knows no cultural bounds, and it knows no geography, and that's the important thing, because you go to Italy, I go to Italy, I go out to the United States, and you pick up the conversation, and it's the same conversation. You might be waving your hands around trying to make yourself understood in some areas, but the conversation, the narrative is exactly the same. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, we're one nation under a groove. I think that's the best description. We're talking sort of a little bit, and I wanted to.
We're talking quite a lot.
It is the area we're in, though, was looking at so far. What do you think has been the most impactful innovation that you've seen during your fishing career so far?
Ooh. Crikey. That's really difficult. The most impactful innovation. I'm going to say something quite odd. I'm going to say a modern fly line in the conventional sense, because I grew up using split cane, and I grew up fishing silk, which, and anyone that knows those two combinations knows that you could still use a modern line on a split cane rod. And I still use silk lines, but the ease and the development of lines and the way in which they behave is incredibly different to silk, and allows all sorts of things to be done. I mean, you've got to take into account that I'm actually not using catgut leaders anymore. I've stopped dampening my leaders ages ago. But yeah, I think it's fly lines, actually. People generally go for carbon rods, but there's a thing nowadays of easing back from the brink of faster and faster action rods to go back to more mellow action rods. So Yeah, I think it's got to be a fly line, really.
Perfect answer. We touched on rods there, and you are a sublime caster.
You haven't seen me recently, have you?
Do you have a Hall of Fame rod? Is there one that you'd reach for, or one that's had a significant impact for you in your life? It might not just be from a fishing perspective. It might mean something on a completely different level.
I'm trying to think of the one that really just did it for me. I've got one at the moment, which I absolutely adore. It's the Orvis Helios, and it's 9'4" weight, and I've used it a lot, and I absolutely adore it. It turns over a 20-foot leader when I want it to do, because that's the other thing I've learned is my leaders got so much longer on rivers now, Pete. So much longer. I mean, I'm having to use 20-foot leaders on the Taff and the Usk and what have you. And I'm learning the art of downstream dry fly. That's intriguing. You know, having been spot welded to a world of upstream only. It's a whole new world, and it's very subtle. But anyway, that would be my one, because it's just delivering. It's so exquisitely precise. That's what I love about it. I don't even have to think. I love that fly rod. I really do. And I've used Sage, and I love Sage, but this one, it seems to follow my hand and my hand shape and my thought process almost. It's really uncanny. It's a great fly rod.
Yeah, I've had a go of one and really liked it. Only 5 minutes casting it, and really liked it. And I know Andy Buckley raved about it as well on a review that he did. So all round, I think that's a strong...
Yeah, it's just a good fly rod. I mean, I've got lots of rods I really love for doing specific things, but I think that's the one I'd make an excuse to use it. And I think that's a good reason, actually.
Nice. Let's touch on what are your observations from a downstream dry?
Oh, crikey. Well, having missed about 40 fish initially, it could have been 41. Because your timing's got to be absolutely bang on. And you see what the problem one has, there's a couple of areas on the Usk where I'm probably going to get pilloried, because they'll probably tell me that it's actually upstream. But there's a bit that it's really rocky, but it's where the bank has capsized a little bit. It's just subsided along there. And it's really difficult wading. And it's great big rocks and boulders and all the rest of it. And there's some honking great fish just downstream. And the only way to get to them is to literally, not quite long trotter fly, but to do a downstream cast. But then you've got to understand about men's, because you can't put yourself in full view of the fish. So you actually got to do a very curious, and you start making up casts. It's great, actually. So I've got this sort of strange sort of tea-like drift going. And then you see this brown, you know, how that, when they start coming up, you see that dark shape, don't you? And it just broaches the surface. And it's oilily black, that head. And it comes up and you see the mouth open. And of course, instinctively, upstream, you'd strike because you'd pull the fly into the mouth. I instinctively struck and keep pulling the fly out of the mouth, which is not good, really. Good for the fish, good for conservation, not good for me. Anyway, so learning to strike and time the strike, waiting for that head to go down, and it can be a worryingly long time, you know, that and lift, but lifting up and not sideways. And once you work it all out, there was a point during the Granham hatch where I was just getting flummoxed. I just couldn't do it. And then all of a sudden, I started doing this and started to get the timing right. And it was wonderful. But also, then you've got a problem because the fish is downstream of you. And the fight is totally different. So there the subtlety comes where you have to actually ease off on everything. and not fight it quite as hard as if you were fishing with it upstream. So there are a whole lot of rather curious anomalies attached to this, which, it again, after all these years, Pete, is, finding out that's that great big ball of onion that you take away, I keep talking about, and there's always that little bit to uncover, always.
Absolutely love it. That's exactly why I just keep coming back for more. But I often ask guests about a dream destination, but suspect there aren't many places you've not been. You've touched on a few of them today, but do you have a favourite place?
I think we may have mentioned this. I do. I'd love to. There is one trip I'd like to make still. Well, there's two. Can I make two?
Two, yeah, absolutely.
I've still got a. There's a little island just off British Virgin Islands. That is, it's just a maze of flats. No one guides there. It's difficult to get to. There is no infrastructure. I mean, the only way of getting around is a mini moke.
You're not a number, right?
Yeah. I bowled up, Pete, and I said, "Can I?" Yeah, you can hire this. And I said, "Okay, so where the brakes?" So I didn't have any brakes. I said, "The windscreen, the windscreen wipers don't work." I said, "The gears, how do you get reverse?" "Oh, you don't get reverse. You have to go around in circles." I said, "Well, is there any first or second?" He said, "No, there's no first or second. So it's just one gear to go backwards, forwards, sideways, and everywhere else. And you could see everything alarmingly underneath your feet." So that's the only way you can travel around. Anyway, so I got out there and travelled around, and there are some of the biggest bonefish I've ever seen. And but I hit the wrong time of the year. I only saw one or two. I caught one, missed another, and I really only had a shot of about 3-4 shots. That's all, and I did a lot of waiting. But I think I just chose the wrong time of year. I'd love to go back there. So that's one, and I still want to go. It would be a bit later than this, I think. It would be probably more October, first week in October, maybe. I'd still love to go out west to fish all the rivers of the west. I love it with the fall colours. I love it at that time of the year with the sandhill cranes. It still draws me, and I still find an attraction to that. For one reason or another, I won't go out there at the moment.
I think listeners will be fascinated to hear you mention bonefish there, and certainly the wilderness of it. And are you still, as the angler that you are, that has been to many places, still trying to search out or find your own little piece of wilderness in some way?
No, not really. I think wilderness is where you find it. Wilderness can be your backyard if you want it to be that way. There are areas on the Usk where I'll be alone with a dog, and it's my own personal wilderness. So I'm old enough to realise that you don't have to quest to some faraway land to find a wilderness. It's more about your own personal spirit than it is an actual place. That said, yeah, I mean, I still love the loneliness of it, but I still like company too. It's that old thing. I love going with people fishing, separating, and then coming back for a cup of tea or something. I think that's wonderful, because then you share misery, you share jubilation, you just share. And I like that. So, that's cake and eating it too, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Often I say on here, there's no place like home, right?
Well, there isn't. I mean, I can fish in the middle of a park here in Newport. I can find my own little wilderness, and very often it is, because, it's where everybody leaves everything else. But, you can get out of the way and you block out the traffic noise, you block out everything, and you're just there. It's fantastic. and that's on my back, literally in my backyard almost.
And do you find with having been, you're always busy, I know, but in more recent times as well, I can only picture you putting everything together that you've been talking about. Have you found that fishing has been your little escape to reset?
I think it increasingly so, oddly. We talked about the pressures of having a role within fishing, but it not actually being fishing. And, I've never been that person that's not loved fishing. So, I still want to do it. I still crave to do it. I'll be driving up along the Wye tomorrow to a meeting about the Welsh youth team, and I will be looking. I probably don't come anywhere near me when I'm driving along that road, because I'm a liability, because I'll be looking at the river. But and that's it. If that seeped away in any way, shape, or form, Pete, I wouldn't be doing it. I really wouldn't. And there's nothing I'd want to do more, actually.
Has that ever left you though? Has there always been that love and passion, or have there been moments where you thought, "Oh man, really"? Or has I thought that might be the answer. Yeah,
no, wouldn't be talking to you if that was the case.
Yeah,
I mean, there are diversions, but that's always been the central theme. It's always been there. I mean, I haven't ever not wanted to fish. I mean, no, not at all.
Perfect. We've been speaking over an hour now, and I'm going to throw a little bit of a fastball at you. We have the song for the Fly Culture playlist that's hidden away in Spotify somewhere or other. What would be the...
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
it's a real thing, is it?
It is a real thing. It's on Spotify somewhere or other.
Right.
So it's there. You can see it. I just haven't uploaded anything for absolutely ages. And again, to everybody, apologies that I haven't. I still kind of listen to it. And Stefano, when we're out in Italy, puts it on his car. So we will sing along to a few songs. And there's a real mix of stuff there. But what do you have for me that you put on?
I've absolutely got two here. And I will cry, whine, moan, and do all sorts of rather ungainly things if I'm not allowed to have these two. And it's one I've listened to recently, and I suddenly thought, good Lord, that is so good. And I'd forgotten how good it actually was. And it wasn't a solo from Pink Floyd. It's Gordon Giltrap, whom most people probably will never have heard of, Fear of the Dark. Because when I actually listened to the way it was constructed as a song, there's no vocal in it, it's purely instrumental. I thought, God, that could be a really, really good backdrop to a fishing video or something. It really is good. It's got drama. You've got to listen to it. So it's Fear of the Dark by Gordon Giltrap. The other one, and when I start popping clogs and doing stuff, I'm demanding that somebody plays at least part of this when I start, going on another adventure somewhere else, is Vaughan Williams's Fantasia on the Greensleeves, because it brings my father, it was his favourite, it brings youth, it brings my love of the British countryside all together in one cathartic little lump, and you cannot fail to be moved by it. So, sorry, two.
Perfect. Everyone, go and listen to those. I think you're going to enjoy those. Charles, thank you. As always, speaking with you is uplifting. It's energizing, inspirational. You've always been an inspiration to me and many others, and continue, please, doing what you're doing. I'd like to say a huge thanks for being a guest on the podcast today.
Pete, it's been a joy. And good luck on your new adventure.
I cannot wait. I'm beside myself with excitement, so really looking forward to it. So thank you again. Everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As ever, there's never going to be any charge for these. I just love being able to talk to people. And in this case, I've been able to talk to one of my heroes. And it's wonderful to be able to do that. So thank you so much for listening. There'll be plenty more episodes coming very, very soon.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.